I'm going to kick us off here. We're just sitting at just almost 5 after, so I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through what Stephanie's going to share with us today. So a few housekeeping items. If you don't know already, my name is Zoe. I am the current chair of the Women in Industry Committee. Very excited to bring another Coffee for the Win series to you today. So this series is a little bit of a two-part series. We want to talk about women in sales. And so we're kicking it off today with Stephanie. And then next week, we're going to have a panel discussion in case you haven't already registered for that one. So I want to start off by thanking Cogeco. Without them, these events would not be possible. And so we're really grateful for their sponsorship. So thank you so much to Cogeco for that. So moving on here, our speaker today is Stephanie Van Dam. She is bringing over 20 years of sales management, and leadership experience to her clients on a daily basis. She works with ambitious business owners of all sizes and sectors who are committed to growing their companies. Stephanie has been a speaker with the Ontario Craft Brewers Conference, West End Home Builders Association, and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. Stephanie has worked with professional sports teams, IT companies, finance, engineering, and architecture professionals, and those in the landscaping industry, assisting with the overall development and improvement of their sales organizations, utilizing her personal experience and the best practice tools and processes of Sandler training. So without further ado, I'm going to let Stephanie take it over from here. The only thing to note here is during this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and then I will cue Stephanie up, because if you have a question, she definitely wants to get it answered. I will let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zoe. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate doing this. When we talked, when Elle and I first started talking about this idea, there was a lot of interest about it. So I'm really excited to be here, to be sharing this with all of you, and to see so many people on here. So that's really fantastic. Good morning. A couple things that I wanted to get going for everybody is I would love for this session to be a bit interactive. I believe that I'm going to try and pile in as much information for you as I can this morning, but also would like some interaction here. So what I would love for everybody to start to do is to locate the chat box at the bottom of your screen and type in a hello, good morning, happy sunshine, great it's Friday, TGIF, whatever you want to write in there. If you could just pop that into the chat, because then I know that you know where it is. And for those of you who don't yet, that's perfectly fine. Some of us are Zoom experts and some of us use Teams and some of us aren't familiar with Zoom at all. Judy was saying this is her second call of the day, so she's a pro by now. And so here we go. Because I'm going to ask a few questions to get us kind of started. So when I start, so I'm just going to get my presentation up here, guys, to let you know. So a couple things about me, women in sales. For those of you who haven't heard of Sandler before, you're like, Steph, this is great. Who the heck are you? So Sandler is a company that has been around for a long time. We're not going to spend too much on this slide, just that know that it's been more than a couple of days that I've been doing this sales training thing, and Sandler as a system has been around for quite a while, and is across the world. I have the local franchise here in Hamilton and Niagara. So I wanted to get this out first because for any of you who'd like to connect with me, promote this on social media along with We HBA or Women in Industry. Here's my connection details. I am very open to having a conversation, even if it's just, you know, a 5 to 10 minute, hey, Stephanie, I have a problem, question, whatever, please let me know. And that's how you get in touch with me if you want to do that. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do so. Give me a quick hello in your message as to how you met me and that you were on this call here, and that's great. Would love that. So one of the things that we're going to go through, I just wanted to say for those of you here who are in sales, please pop in the chat. What's your biggest sales challenge right now? What are you going through that you find to be one of the most frustrating things about sales? I've given a few examples here. You know, is it saving, you know, people keep wasting your time. People keep telling you, oh God, like it's 2 weeks, you know, keep calling me back in 2 weeks from now. Or can you just get me a better price? Maybe you are having struggles with time management. Please pop in the chat. What are your biggest struggles with selling? What are the things that you hate the most about selling? And this is where, see? Oh, okay, I like this. Human interaction, yes. Cold calling virtually, very cool. Anybody else? I want a few more in here. I think there's like 20 people, 20, 30 people on this call. So we're all missing the human interaction. I love this. And this is one of the things that it is about as we're going through this, some of the challenges that we face about specifically being a woman in sales. And I know here's where the caveat I'll put out. I know everybody's personal experience might be a little bit different, right? One of the things I think as women, we are socialized to do, whether it be from our parents or through society, is we're taught, obviously, we are social creatures for sure. The other part to that is sometimes we are taught to be a bit demure, to not be the loudest voice in the room, right? To be very agreeable with people. So when we're going through some of this, I want to then give me a thumbs up, or if you're agreeing with that about my assessment of what it is to sort of be a woman. You feel pressure to be kind of quiet in the room, or we have to deal about challenges with family. Yeah. So thank you for that. And so then I want you to write into the chat, what are salespeople? When you hear salespeople in general, what's the stereotype associated with being a salesperson? Please write that in the chat, or say that out loud if you'd like to. Everybody can take themselves off mute. Right? Pushy. That one got everybody talking. Everybody's ready to go there. Scammers. Okay. Oh my gosh. So not very positive, right? Not very positive associations that we have with salespeople. So, and these are very contradictory to who we want to be as humans, but especially who we want to be as women, right? And what we're taught to be as women. So we have this problem, right? There's a really big issue here because as we're trying to figure out how to be a salesperson or things that we're asked to do, we are feeling like we have to be what you've all written down in the chat. We have to be that person in order to be a salesperson, right? Now, I know that's not true. None of you are like that, I would imagine. None of you are really like that. So how are you a salesperson? It would make sense then, of course, women are underrepresented in the sales industry because we feel like we have to be a scammer, shady, aggressive. We only are interested in closing a deal, right? If that's what salespeople are, that's what we feel we may need to be, right? So I wanted to share with you a couple of ways that what we feel at Sandler and how that methodology works to be able to sort of counteract that, to be able to understand that actually women are incredibly natural, because we're so, we tend to, because we've been socialized to be nurturers, right? We're the mothering kind, that we actually are way better salespeople than we give ourselves credit for. We actually come by some of the sales skills that I believe are necessary to be a great salesperson quite naturally. And so I'll show you what I mean by showing you kind of what exists out there right now. So my goal today is to give you a better understanding about how and why people buy, right? And how this can be to our advantage. It can give you a few specific tools, obviously, that you can use immediately for you to better control the conversation, right? Instead of having our prospect control the conversation. And the idea with those things in mind is to give you better closing rate, as it were, to bring on better, more customers, better conversations with more qualified people. Okay? I hope that's okay with you. because that's what I've set us up for today. So I think a few things are really important to know. One of the biggest reasons why people have issues, I think it's really important. How many of you, have competitors in your industry, right? Everybody does, right?
Yeah.
So most of us believe, they said no because they didn't like our product or service. It wasn't fit for our product or service. And I think it's important to know that if that was really the case, there would only be one of you. A competitor wouldn't exist, because if it was about the product or service, then it wouldn't matter who sold it, right? So most of the times, the challenges that we face as salespeople are because of previous interactions with other salespeople. Basically, that's what it is. People are afraid, right? So they have those connotations that you wrote in the chat. So I'll start with a typical seller order. We all have our salesperson's hat on it, right? This is the traditional sort of seller order. We are taught to go out. Somebody gives us a call. We're taught to go out and do a needs analysis. And that typically involves questions that surround our features and the benefits of our product or service, right? So we ask a whole bunch of questions, right? They talk about that needs analysis, and from there we create a quote or a proposal, right? We send somebody that quote and we tell them what we're going to do. We give them some sort of agreement, and it's going to indicate to them how we're going to solve the problem. And then we try to close, right? We do some sort of, hey, here's the quote. What do you want to do now? Would you like to buy? Is this great? And then our customer gives us some sort of objection of some kind, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that objection, we try to, of course, handle it and try to reclose. And then we do the follow-up, right? Let me connect with you in a couple of days. Let me follow up with you in a couple of weeks, next quarter, whatever that is, right? Does that sound familiar? Hands up, and you can do this with the reaction on your screen. Hands up. Yeah, that sounds kind of familiar. So, which is great. And we'll show you this. This has been successful for a lot of people out there, right? It has worked. It catches the low-hanging fruit. People have built some really great incomes on this. So this has worked for a lot of people. So I'm going to switch it up for a second and talk about the typical buyer order. And this is us putting our buyer's hat on, right? Buyer's hat is somehow we express interest. And to a salesperson, that means we pick up the phone and we, call and say, can I make an appointment? Or in the world when we could really assemble, it sounded like you walked into a store or you walked onto a car lot, right? The car sales is the easiest one to use. Everybody knows that one. And then we act motivated somehow. Yeah, I want to know about, can you share with me more? Our company's been looking for, I'm curious about, right? We say something and we get all sorts of information, right? We try to obtain, how would you solve this? How would you do this? What if we did it this way? If we have more offices involved, can we do it this way, right? And from that, well, I need to, my business partner is involved. I have a board of directors I need to run this through. I have to talk to, Aunt Mabel, whatever, because she's involved in making a decision. So I avoid commitment. And then all the time, I then don't want to talk to somebody. I affectionately call the witness protection program, right? People disappear. How many resonate with that as a buyer? I see a few smiles. Yeah. So when I put these, and this, like I said, this works really well for people because I'll go through the 5 easiest to hardest buying motivators, right? So when we talk about how easy is it to close somebody, it's super easy to close somebody who has pain in the now. When they have a problem that needs to be solved immediately, they're the easiest, right? That's what that traditional selling system is good to solve. I use the really great example of if you have a gash in your arm and it's bleeding profusely, are you looking up on Google as to the reviews of the best hospital? Right? No, we're not doing that, of course. We're going to the closest hospital. It doesn't matter, right? But when we're trying to choose the doctor, the dentist, any healthcare professional where we have time, right, where we're not in pain in the now, then we start doing some research, right? The next hardest person to close is the next easiest, person to close is the person who has pain in the future, right? They know that they're going to have pain, so we need to bring them on, right? The person who knows that they need to have their tooth pulled knows that they need to find a dentist or an orthodontist, so they're going to figure it out pretty quick because they've got pain. They might be able to wait a week or a month, but they've got pain. They're going to be easiest. So then we move into people who want to seek gain or pleasure in the now. And then those who want to seek gain or pleasure in the future, right? We all buy emotionally and we justify logically as human beings. We buy emotionally and we justify with logic, which is why the emotions are the ones that make the decision. The person in the most amount of pain right now is the person who's easiest to sell. The interesting part, the fifth and the most hardest person to get a decision out of is the person who is curious. The person who says, hey, I'm kind of interested in about, our company was looking into, we're curious to know a little bit more about, I just had a thought about this. Can you help me out with it? Those people who are curious are the hardest to sell, except I don't know about you. I tend to hear about those people all the time. Those are the people that send me emails, right? And those are the people that when we use this particular selling structure on, so you'll see this presented here together. So as a buyer, we call this in Sandler, we call this the buyer-seller dance. So when somebody comes along and expresses a little interest and all we do or did was to say, oh my gosh, credit card in a heartbeat, let me start asking questions. That's the only qualification I do. So I do a needs analysis, coincides, so you can see how every single step of the way, we as salespeople with that traditional system have trained our buyers to respond predictably. And at the end of the conversation, when we start following up and our buyer disappears, like I said, affectionately enters the witness protection program, we are super frustrated, right? Every call, when you call them at, say I'm going to call you next week at 10 a.m., how many of them are there on the phone, ready to go? Right? How many of them answer the phone? I was going to say, so it's like, yeah, they're not, they may be there, maybe, but so that's what we typically have here. That's our traditional system. And I'm curious to know who's in control, who's leading this dance. That can be a chat or somebody can come off mute and say something if you're brave enough to do that.
Well, it should be the salesperson, the seller. Sometimes it is the buyer. Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's most often the buyer, but we want it to be us. Thank you for answering. I can't see everybody's face when they're answering, so I appreciate it. So thank you. So thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And when we go into, we want to be in control, but it really is the buyer that's in control of that conversation. And so what happens when the buyer is in control? Right? I just want you to think about any previous interactions with your customers, which is how many of you have had the experience where your buyer comes to talk to you and knows exactly the solution that they need as you would give it, right? There's no way our buyer could be wrong in knowing what kind of solution they need, right? She says sarcastically. Right. So some of the problem is that when our buyer is in control of the conversation, that is similar to you walking into a doctor's office with a particular ailment, needing a drug of some kind and saying to the doc when you get in there, hey doc, Don't worry about, no, like, I know I got this. I need a prescription for. Can you just write that out and give it to me, please? And in this situation, under that buyer system, the buyer seller dance, the doctor would then, of course, write a prescription and send you on your way, right? That's the expectation. But a doctor, of course, would never allow that to happen for many reasons. One, because the doctor needs to know if that's actually the right prescription, right? He or she needs to understand what problem you actually have. So the doctor's going to go through all sorts of questions. This is where, as women, we are amazing at this. We are amazing at asking questions. We're amazing at being the investigative journalist into people. I don't know if that's because we're naturally curious people. I don't know if that's because we have kids that we need to find out where they really are, but that's one of the reasons why we tend to be better at this. We also are really good at providing, because of that nurturing sort of way, we're really good at providing the environment to make our customers feel comfortable to ask this question, or to answer them, pardon me. So going back to the doctor's office, we would never, as a doctor, would never allow you to tell them what prescription they need, right? They just wouldn't. Also, it's malpractice if they give you the wrong thing, right? Negligence. Talk about losing your license, right? So why, if that's the case, why is it that as salespeople, we allow our customers to do that? Why do we allow them to do it, right? There's no real reason except our own confidence, conviction, fear, some of those emotions, right? So what I would like to do is toss up your hand if you believe in your product or service that you sell. Hand up. Hand up, keep it up if you believe that you're, oh, I love this. Yes. Hand up if you believe that you offer that product or service at a fair or reasonable price. Right? Me too. If that's the case, if we believe in our product and service, and we believe that we offer it at a fair or reasonable price, what customer does not want to know about us? And why are we letting them control the conversation? Right? So this is, I'm showing you the Sandler selling system now. You can use any system. You could Google systems and there's all over the place, but you're going to get the concepts in a second here. So this is what we do. We talk about building the relationship first, because there's very little trust in that previous relationship, right? So are you establishing some sort of relationship with your customer first? Again, as women, we tend to be better at this than the guy. I'm going to say on the whole. But how can we do this? And this goes more than just what was going on this weekend, right? Or what are you doing this weekend? We talked about the weather. Canadians, we're so good at asking about the weather and having that as a conversation piece, right? But this goes more to this. This talks about how are you utilizing some of the tools, especially virtually, to be able to establish relationships, right? How can we use body language? And we'll see this in a second. Are we talking about communication styles, right? How are we using those to be able to speak to people? Then we talk about maintaining the relationship with what we refer to as upfront contracts. Those are things, how we can set expectations for the meeting that we're about to have. Then we move on to how are we qualifying people? What is their pain? Pain is not a concept that Sandler owns, although he was one of the first people to bring it in. But what problem are we solving for somebody? Where is the gap for our customer, and how are we helping them close it, right? Can we even? Budget. We often think about this as money, right? We all want them to have money, but they also need to have time. They also need to have resources, right? Budget are those things. And the big two things, are they willing and able to spend it? And if they don't know, are you prepared to share with them a range so that they can move on with it, right? We can keep going. The next thing here is decision, and not decision as in when they're going to make a decision. Like this is the part where they do this, is who else is involved in making the decision. Some people talked about, hey, one of my big sales challenges is I can't get to the right decision maker. I don't know who the proper stakeholders are. Right? So this is where you find that out. This is also where you find out their timeline and if it's something you can live with. And at the end of it, you'll notice what's missing here. I haven't given a quote yet. I've gone through all of this conversation and I have not given them a piece of paper or an email that tells them what my price is yet. Because you know why? Because if they don't have the budget, if they don't have pain, if they don't have a system that I don't want to work in, I'm not spending the time on putting a quote together. If I have a product or service that I believe in at a price that is fair, why wouldn't they want to do business with me? So they need to earn my business just as much, right? We're all on an equal playing field. And I think this is one of the things, of course, that sometimes as women, we can get, well, I just want whatever business, right? I don't get to do it's a different mindset coming into the game. We are all on equal business stature. Right? Customer has a problem or a service, and we have a solution. And hopefully they meet. And if they don't, it's okay. If they don't, it's okay to walk away. They're not a good fit for you. But if they are, then let's keep talking, right? So here we call closing the sale. This is when we give a proposal fulfillment. This is where we fulfill what we just talked about in the previous steps. So are you doing this? So here's one of the things. I love how we talked about salespeople being aggressive. and I think someone used scammy was one of the words. So for us, we believe that hard selling, that aggressive, pushy selling is good for one thing, right? Hard pushback. As customers, we all do it, right? We want to be like that. I don't want to deal with you, right? So how can what's the difference here, right? How can we make a difference? We don't need to be the hard seller. There is no shortage of resources out there for hard selling. You Google sales training, you will come up, and then Zoe and her amazing team will track you forever with her results, because that's what she's paid to do, people. And to make sure that they find out about 10x this or hard closing, these 3 sales hacks too, right? Like there's all this shortcut stuff out here. So that's good for hard selling. And if you want that, then go for it. I'm not your person, right? I'm not your girl for that. But I also don't believe that's the right way to sell, right? I think that there needs to be a fit, and I think you can come together at the end. So I can't do all of that within the next 20 minutes. So what we are going to focus on here today is working on a couple of things with rapport. Now, here's where I think that women excel at this. Building rapport is your responsibility as a sales professional. It is not your buyer's job to establish rapport with you. Your buyer's job is to get the best price, the best service at the price that works for them. Right? Building rapport is your responsibility. So, what the heck does that mean? So how are we doing that? So when we talk about that, I think this is something that most of us know. Intuitively, we know this, bonding and rapport, but I want to formalize it here. People tend to do business with people they trust, right? They start to trust people, of course, as salespeople. We don't talk to them for very long, right? We have a really short window to start to do that. So people tend to do business with people that they trust. Of course, they trust people who they like, of course, and then they like people who are similar to them, right? They like people who are like them. And so how do we do that, right? How do we talk about people that are like them? And so somebody had mentioned before the idea of this virtual, right? People want to be heard and understood. So somebody talked about cold calling virtually, right? Here is the greatest part about this. It actually, when we look at how the elements of communication, when we have a visual with somebody, right? When we can have a visual, body language counts for 55% of communication. So and I'm not suggesting you guys need to turn your cameras on, but I want to point out that when you have a virtual meeting, right, when you're on there, you can understand more about what people are saying by turning your camera on. Right, that's a big thing. If you are having Zoom meetings with customers, I would strongly encourage you to turn the camera on. I know not everybody loves it, but that's one of the ways. If we were meeting face to face, we would be doing that, right? Tonality is 38% how you are saying it, right? It's not the words you say, it's how you say it, right? So how we're doing that, how we're having that conversation is so important. So if those of you spoken words, the actual words you're saying, 7%. So if you can't, so for those of you who are worried about what to say, don't worry about it. Or worry about it less, because how you're communicating, the tone of voice that you're using, that enthusiasm, if you're smiling, right, that counts far more than the actual words that you say. Here's the problem. What's our primary mode of communication with people? Right? Email. I was going to say, who put that up? I get the chat back up again. Yeah, email. Right? So this is where problem. This is why.
Sure is.
This is why people talk about doing video so much in marketing, especially now. This is why Zoe's all over LinkedIn, right? For video. So, and many of you are too. I just can see Zoe, so that's why I'm picking on her right now. So, but this is why video is so encouraging. Not many people do that. If you haven't gotten onto the video bandwagon, do some videos, because people can convey that. It's so much more interesting, right? Because it engages more of what we do. So, or what we see, what we hear, right? That's why people like video more. So the other cool thing about this is, second to that, we talk about phone. Let's pretend for a second we're on the phone, right? We have zero body language, except maybe if we're hearing somebody clack away on a keyboard, right? So be mindful of that. But when you have zero body language, your tonality now jumps to 88%. Spoken word is 12. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So for those of you who are concerned about making sure, am I going to say the right thing, right? Am I going to mess it up by saying the wrong thing? I don't have the right words. Or maybe you're new to the industry and you may not have all of that product knowledge that people talk about they want to have. It's less about the actual words and more about the sincerity and authenticity and enthusiasm that you share in your voice. That's far more important. So the other thing that we talk about, and this is one of the key pieces, I say this in every session that I do with somebody. If somebody's going to take away anything, this would be the piece to take away. You can't blame buyers for doing something that you didn't tell them they couldn't do. Most of us have seen it where a buyer takes forever to get back to us, right? We had such a good call, right? You go back to your boss, your leader, and they're saying, how was that call? It was really great. They said they were going to get back to me in a couple of weeks, right? We had a really good conversation. They said they were going to call me next week, or I'm going to call them back, right? Our favorite reason why people don't do business with us is because they're thinking it over, right? Who gets that as an excuse to not do business? Thanks, Zoe. Anybody else? Yeah, I'm going to think it over, right? How many of us, I hate that. I can't, it's so frustrating, right? So how can we do this? How can we avoid the think it over? I hated getting that. So how do we avoid the think it over? And the simple way is by telling customers, I don't want to think it over. You need to give me a decision at the end of this conversation. It's simple, not easy, but simple, right? We just tell them. It's not an option. And then we hold them accountable to it. And this is where somewhat, I say female, sometimes some of us find this challenging to do because we don't want to ruffle any feathers, right? We've been told to be the good daughter, that don't have this don't ruffle feathers, right? Keep it easy, keep the boat steady. So when we start holding people accountable to things, then that can be a bit of a challenge for us. So this is where I say grab a little bit of courage, because I know you all have that, and we're able to go through this. So in our world, I mentioned earlier something called the upfront contract. So if you were a note taker, this would be the time. So we have an upfront contract. There are 5 things that compose of an upfront contract. So I'll talk about what this is, and then we'll go through a couple of examples as to how this works and what it might sound like. Excuse me. So at the beginning of every conversation that you would have, you could use this with anybody. So for those of you who aren't pure salespeople on this call, then you can use this with your team. You can use this, good gracious, my mom uses this with me now. And she, because when she calls me during the workday, she'll say, how much time do I have you for? I just called too. So you can use this with family, you know, obviously your personal conversations. So upfront contract. Number 1, why the heck are we getting together? Why are we having this conversation? What is the purpose of us taking time out of our day? Why are we doing it? Now, it can be as simple as we're continuing the conversation from last week. That could be the purpose of your call, right? We don't need to get too philosophical here. So the next thing that we talk about is time. Now, the time piece, this doesn't need to be in any specific order. It's conversational. You can talk about it however you want to. I always mention time at the beginning, because if I've booked a 90-minute meeting with somebody and they don't have that 90 minutes, I want to know about it so I can reschedule another meeting, right? How long are we getting together for? Then we talk about a couple of different roles, right? What is our buyer's role during the meeting, right? What do we want to know from them? What information are we looking for from them to be able to walk away from that meeting with? And so that might sound like, hey, typically when we have these meetings, I want to know about this, you know, people ask me about this and this and this, or I'm going to look about what your plans are for the future and how that might fit in, right? Pretty high level stuff. At the end, your role. What's your role? What does your buyer want to know from you? Everybody knows price is usually the first thing, right? Everybody wants to know what the price is. And this is a great opportunity for you to take price off the table. And what I mean by that is you get to say, hey, Zoe, thanks so much for getting together. I know typically when I have these meetings, people want to know about, of course, the price they're going to win. So we're going to talk about that today. They also want to know about B, C, D, whatever that is, right? So this way, when I tell my customer that I'm going to talk about price in our conversation, there is a little bit of trust built there, because like, okay, she's not going to do that bait and switch thing where she tells me how amazing it is, and at the end, they, you know, the kablamo with the price, right? That's what buyers are afraid of. So when I tell them up front that we're going to work on price, or we're going to talk about it at some point, okay, that's good. We're going to talk about price. Great. So, and then at the end, the outcome. What the heck is going to happen at the end of the meeting? Are we having another meeting? That could be the outcome. The only decision we make here today is whether it makes sense for us to book another meeting. Nothing to buy, can't sell you anything, right? Or maybe it's a yes or a no, and it could be no for now. And this is where you add the think it over. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what I really want to avoid is for both of us to be chasing each other at the end of this conversation, right? For 2 weeks on end, I'd really like to avoid that think it over. So if we're not at a yes and move forward, then we're at a no for now. Are you okay with that? So this is where we talk about the outcomes and being specific with this. It takes a little courage to do the outcome, because as salespeople, we get happy ears, right? If they're not saying no, they're saying, you know, it's okay. They're not saying yes either, but they're not saying no. So I've got this hope thing, right? We call it hopium in our world. And those are the people that stay in our pipeline forever and ever and ever, who you're terrified to have pipeline review meetings with your leader with, because like, well, what happened to this person? Well, they've been in there for 16 weeks when they originally said 2 weeks ago, right? So this is what is important about having an outcome and sticking to it and holding your customer accountable to it. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what that sounds like. So let's pretend you get an incoming phone call, right? Somebody says, hey, can you, because I know we've got so many different roles and people and industries on this call, so trying to make it with everybody. So hey, you get an incoming call. Stephanie, can you help me out with this? Or I have a question I'm curious about. And you're like, hey, no problem. Thanks for the call. Happy to help you out with that. We're going to need to be on the phone for about 10 minutes so we can talk about a few options, make sure I get you to the right place. Is that okay? That's an upfront contract, right? Sometimes we feel like our customers have an unlimited amount of time. They called me, right? Don't they have all this time available to have this conversation? I can share with you on more than one occasion, I've called through to somebody thinking that it was going to be a 5-minute phone call, and 15 minutes later, I'm still on the phone with them. It was for insurance because I had to change my address, right? I didn't know. So we're the experts. We, as a person, if she had just said to me, it's going to take about 20 minutes for this call, I would have said, no, I need to go eat my lunch. It was on lunch break. So I'm like, no, I need to eat my lunch. I'll call later when I have that time. Right? So it's not that it's a bad thing. I just need to set expectations. So when you get an incoming phone call, this is what an upfront contract would sound like. Here's a second, so let's say you've moved on from the lead gen call, right? Somebody's called in and now you're having a longer phone call, right? So, hey, thanks for the inquiry. Thanks for the call. You know, what can we help you with? Whatever that is. So customer responds with, hey, I want to buy this. I have plans to do this. Can you help me with whatever? Fill in the blank, right? And then they ask, what's it going to cost? What's your best price? I need some sort of estimate to compare to 2 other people, right? So can you do that for me? How much money should I be setting aside? This I designed specifically for the retail space, right? So, hey, we can totally help you with that. Absolutely. Sounds pretty exciting, that new project you've got going on. You know, let me, take a few minutes and we're going to put something together for you. Okay. I want to be sure I'm getting the right pricing or the right info. Do you have 20 minutes for us to be able to go over that? I'm going to ask a few questions. So for those of you who are wanting to I'm going to say add a role play. For those of you who have different industries or different product lines that you're trying to go to, right? So for those of you who have a product and then you want to sell an add-on of some kind, right? There's a different vertical in your business. This is a really great way for you to open the door to ask some of these questions, right? I may ask you a few questions that seem unrelated, but I want to be sure you've got the best information to make the most informed decision. Is that okay? What customer is going to say, I don't want to make the most informed decision? It's fine. And here's the other part. If they're like, no, just give me the price. Do you want to do business with that person? If the only thing that they're qualifying for you, if the only thing that they care about is price, are they qualified to be your customer? Right, that's a thought. So some of you may say yes to that question, in which case then this training doesn't matter so much. But I'm going to guess most of you are not the Walmart of your industry. We can't all be the lowest price, and most of us don't want to be. So if you have the add-on, if you've got a different part of the business that you're trying to figure out, how do I pivot? Gosh, I hate that word. Sorry for using that. How many of you, we've heard that so much, right, in the last 12 months? How many of you, if you want to move from the business that they asked about to another area of the business, this is a really great way to say, hey, may I ask you a few questions that seem unrelated? Want to make sure I get you the best information. Is that okay? Sure, that's okay. Right? So at the end of that, and for those of us who get compared on price all the time, you're going to love this one. You know what? And this takes a little bit of courage, right? For the brave. Hey, Zoe, can I share something? This probably isn't you, but sometimes people call us. We spend some time together making sure that they've got all the right information. We give them a quote, and then they take that to somewhere else to get a better price without considering the value and experience that we pride ourselves on delivering. What are the chances of that happening? Right? When we say that question, we feel a little brave to ask that question, because this is now, the customer's never been asked this question before, right? If we sound like, look like, smell like every other salesperson in our industry, we will be treated like every other salesperson in our industry. So when we ask a question like this, then it sets ourselves apart. Because now the buyer's like, oh gosh, they figured me out. Now I have to be accountable to something. It also provides you the opportunity, when we talk about the experience, the value and experience that we pride ourselves on delivering, you have now brought up another reason why somebody would do business with you. You've talked about why somebody might, somebody pay more for your product or service than somebody else. So you can change value and experience to anything else. Now I give you these things. I know I've put them up here on here. You can copy them, take pictures, whatever you want to do. That's fine. These are not meant to be a script, right? These are my words. So take them, rewrite them, use your own language. Some of you might say this and like, this is not how I speak. Totally fine. Sandler has never believed in scripting, so it's not something we do, right? It's about developing your own sales voice, right? And especially as a woman, you have your own voice to be able to use and interact with people. I want to make sure that you're using it, right? So in the end, the person with the stronger system, when we go back to that system, buyer seller system, the person with the stronger system will always be in control. How can we make sure that's you, right? Making sure that's you starts with using that upfront contract. That's you deliver that, takes 2 minutes at the beginning of a call. Building rapport is your responsibility. Control the call and build trust with setting those expectations in the upfront contract. And that your time, your energy, and your experience is worth something. Please don't give it away. Stop giving quotes that talk about how awesome it is to do business with me. It is awesome to do business with you, but they have to earn that first. Right? You can't just give it away to people. And if we all do this, then all of our customers change, right? Could you imagine how elevated the customer experience would be if we all stopped giving quotes to unqualified people? Right? What would that look like? Customers would have a different way. They would start valuing things differently, because when we believe that we are only based on price, it's the only way our customer can decide. Right? They all think that we're the same. So the only differentiator is price. So your time and energy and experience is worth something. So please stop giving it away for free. Right? So that's my time to allow for a few questions here. I saw a few things in there. Questions from the group, Zoe. Oh.
That was so awesome, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm probably a little bit more familiar with Sandler than just about everyone on the call, but I've always believed in it, and I can attest, if anyone is interested in learning more about Sandler, it totally changed my experience and my views on sales. It's an awesome system that just, you end up getting the best clients out of it. So nice. It's really great. Does anyone have any questions? I saw the one question that was in the chat that I had a feeling you'd get to, and you did, was around the upfront contract and what is the upfront contract.
Oh, yeah.
So I know that was, I was like, I think she's getting there.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Stephanie? Feel free to hop off mute or put it in the chat and we can get those answered.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked about setting budget expectations as part of the upfront contract before quoting, which is something we follow pretty closely. But a typical response when we ask about budget considerations and if they have thought anything about that, we usually get, I don't know how much I should spend, or I don't know how much this costs. without kind of getting into this dance, is there an easier way to handle that?
So I'll back and say, when we talk about budget at the beginning in that upfront contract to say, hey, this is, we're going to talk about budget. All we need to do is to say that we're going to talk about budget. If they say, well, I don't even know how much this is going to cost, then what I would say at that point is to say something like, don't worry about it. We're going to be able to go through a few things to make sure that we both leave this conversation with a good understanding of what the budget would be. And so the upfront contract is something that we deliver at the beginning of the conversation. And then when we move through the conversation that we have, then that's where we would address that specific thing, that specific part about, I don't know how much it costs. So without getting into a ton of, I don't have time to do that, to talk about our whole budget step in 5 minutes. But what I can say to everybody is, it's a very common question. So when we're in that phase of the conversation, what we can say is something like, we talk about the problems first, right? This is why budget comes after pain, because we talk about what are your problems to solve, because the problems to solve. So if somebody, as an example, if you've got if my solution, let's say, is $1,000 a month, as an example. If my solution is $1,000 a month, but you have a $500 problem, then it doesn't make sense for me to talk about budget, right? Then we can end that conversation. I don't know what their problem is though, right? So I need to find out what their problem is to figure out how big the problem is. If they've got a $50,000 problem, then we keep talking, right? So if that, so there's that's why I say we talk about pain first to find out how big the problem is, and then we're able to go to budget. If we get to that spot and we know that we can help them, and they're like, you know what, I don't even know, we've just started looking, no idea what this is going to cost or what we should budget for, like, no problem. Then we can kind of give ranges. There's a few different strategies. You can give a range, it's between X and Y. Are you closer to X or are you closer to Y? What have you spent before? You could ask that question. Well, we haven't spent anything before. We're kind of new to this. Okay. If I said, do you have a max? Some people say, well, we have an unlimited budget. I'm like, oh, so 100 grand's okay? Oh, no. Like, oh, so you do have a max. You just haven't shared that with me, right? So everybody's got a number in their mind, right? And it may be an incorrect number. So you could ask for a max. You could talk about, here's some of you price in packages, right? So you do like the gold, silver, bronze, kind of element of packet pricing. So if you don't know, try to quantify the pain that they have with a number so that they have a sense. Like, it's not going to be $5 to fix a $500 problem, right? That doesn't, most of us, that's intuitive. I think most people know that. We would love that, right? Wouldn't that be great? But most business owners know that. So, so give them a range. And the best question that I can ask is, when you give them that range, right? You don't need to give them a specific quote, right? I don't want you to do that. But when you give them a range, the best question to ask after is, should we keep talking?
Okay.
And then that gives them the permission to say, no, that isn't, right? At the beginning, we talked about outcome and said, well, if we don't want to talk, if it's not a fit, I'm okay. We can figure that out halfway through a meeting. There is no rule. People, there's no rule out there that says if you book a 60-minute meeting, you have to stay all 60 of those minutes. There's no rule. In fact, wouldn't we all love to get 20 minutes back in our day to do something else with, right? So if a customer isn't qualified for you and you aren't qualified for your customer, why stay on the call, right? You can just say, you know what, I'm not sure that we're a really great fit for right now. And respectfully exit the conversation. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie.
Oh, hi, Robert. How are you?
Robert, always good to hear from you in training and in all these webinars. I found your steps and ideas are very good, and they apply to men. I just want to make a comment. I think they apply to men and women the same. Right? No, they're very good ideas. I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Yeah,
maybe next time we could have some men, because I think it's very general, but great thoughts and steps. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you.
We don't
Yeah,
have to. It's up to the chair.
No, I believe you. I believe that as well. I think that there are also how we start some things. I think women are massively underrepresented in the sales world, and I think that limits some women in terms of the income potential that they have access to, because sales is can be really lucrative. And so when we're in that space, I think that there's some challenges that we just face in general, based on how we're raised. I think you're right. The philosophies and concepts can apply to either gender for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
Are there any other questions? We're just at 10 o'clock, so just being mindful of everyone's time. But if there's one more question, we can definitely take it. I think we're good.
Good.
So
I just want to say thank you, Stephanie. You've done a great job. Very informative.
Melissa.
Thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to.
that's what I was going to say. Is thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us. You rocked it, and as always, such valuable information that can apply to so many and help so many of us enjoy our time in sales and be a little bit more in control.
Yeah.
Like she said, if you want to connect with her, definitely reach out. LinkedIn, super easy to find, and then don't hesitate to connect with her to have a conversation if you are interested in how Sandler might work for your business. As a reminder, next Friday is another event. We're going to have 4 panelist speakers talking more about their specific experience in sales. So if you have a chance to join us, we would love to have you. That's sure to be a really informative discussion, but also a great showcase about the benefits of women being in sales and how they've enjoyed their experiences. So for now, we're going to wrap up. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have an awesome Friday and an awesome weekend.
Great job, Zoe. Great job,
Thank
Stephanie.
you. Thank you so much.
Really good.
Thanks,
Excellent.
Robert.
Thanks, Stephanie. It was good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.